You.
Hello, Johnny.
Stay away from me. A little late for that.
Nice bike. Yeah.
Why are you here?
Oh, I've always been here, Johnny. All along. Phoenix, Denver, Houston.
It was you. Keeping me alive.
No, Johnny. It's all you. You're the best. And I'm your greatest fan. The posters, the video games, the crowds, screaming, chanting, Johnny, Johnny, Johnny. It makes me so proud. It's like watching an investment that keeps growing and growing until the day you cash it in. That day is today, Johnny. Find the one known as Blackheart and destroy him.
Find him yourself.
It doesn't work like that. You're under contract, remember? If you succeed, I'll return your soul.
I'm not doing it.
You don't have any choice.
Welcome to the Superhero Cinephiles Podcast. I'm your host, Perry Constantine, and today we're going to be talking about 2007's Ghost Rider with a new guest, and that is Jeff Fountain. Jeff, how you doing today?
Hey, not too bad. How are you doing today?
I'm not doing too bad myself. Did not have the best time rewatching this movie last night, but we can get into that a little bit later.
I watched it earlier today, so yeah, it's a rough one to get through.
It's a rough one, yeah. But we'll talk about that. Before we start getting into that, let's start with some more pleasant conversation. So why don't you tell people a little bit about yourself?
Okay, I'm the chairman of the United States Department of Nerds and the leader of the Council of Nerds over at the USDN Podcast. It's a podcast that when I go live most of the time, I try to go live at least once a month, sometimes twice. We cover everything from TV series to movies. The last movie I think I did was Deadpool and Wolverine. I have a show written right now for Agatha, so we'll be covering Agatha, I think, the week of Thanksgiving. And then so people are like, oh, well, Agatha was like a month ago. I'm like, I give people time to watch it and let it marinate. And then I want to talk about it. That way people have seen it. Then they tune in, have questions, and I can answer those questions for them. Because what I normally try to do, I'm like, hey, here's what you got on the TV series. But hey, here's what you get in the comic book. So I always try to bring it back to the comic book or what the character actually is. Because Agatha was the first, I don't want to call her a superhero, but she's never had her own comic book. So is that something I will try to point out when I have my show next week on that? And then I have an upcoming show the second week of December, and we're going to be discussing Cobra Kai Season 6 Part 2. So we're kind of all over the place, and then I do a weekly comic book recommendation show where I basically just say, hey, here's what I picked up this week. Here's what I'm currently reading. And that's what I do over at the USDN Podcast.
Okay, cool. So just very quickly, and I don't want to, people should tune into your show to hear, your full in-depth thoughts about it. But just very briefly, what were your overall thoughts on Agatha All Along?
Oh, man. I enjoyed it, but I try to find the positive of everything. But for me, it was something, I loved what they did with it because they literally took a character with no real comic book. I mean, the first introduction of her, I think, was with, she was the Fantastic Four's nanny to their children. I think was her first introduction. So she's never really had a story.
So, yeah.
She's never had a comic book other than like guest appearances in comic books. So I love that it took this relatively unknown character, brought her to the forefront, gave her a story, gave her a history, introduced the MCU to Death, introduced the MCU to Wiccan. So from those perspectives, I look at it as like they did a fantastic job in the way they did that. So I would recommend everybody go watch it. It
Yeah,
to me was really good.
I enjoyed it a lot too. Spoilers a little bit. The revelation of who Teen was is something that I was expecting all along, so that didn't
Mm-hmm.
surprise me. But
Nope.
I was very surprised to see who Rio ended up being, and that really threw
Yes.
me for a loop.
That was probably one of my favorite things because I had a sense because they were like, "Oh, she's the Green Witch," and I'm like, "Green Witch." I'm like, "Okay." I'm like, things don't add up. And then as slowly the way her costumes and stuff started evolving, and you started picking out little things, and you kind of knew she was something more. So it was just waiting for that reveal of who she is exactly. And when they revealed her to be Death, I was like, yes, the possibilities with this is now endless. Aubrey Plaza, welcome to the MCU because I hope we see more.
I mean, yeah, if you're gonna cast someone as the personification of death, I mean, and it's hard to think of a better casting choice than Aubrey Plaza for that. It was a spot on casting.
Perfection.
Yeah,
Perfection to me.
yeah. And you know what? I had mentioned this on social media, but when they had Thanos and they changed his motivation from trying
Yeah.
to appease death to wiping out half the universe because of resources, I'm like, that actually makes sense. I can dig that. I kind of like what they did
Yeah.
with that. It does make a little bit more sense than him trying to impress a girl. But now that I see that girl is Aubrey Plaza, that would have worked too. I totally get
Yeah.
that.
And they didn't think that far ahead into this. And I'm like, okay, because going into the whole Thanos storyline within the MCU, and when they it was like, why are y'all like this isn't the real reason why he's doing this. I'm like, introduce death, introduce Deadpool into the MCU, give us the real reasons behind all this.
I mean, I can understand why they did that the way they did, especially because at
I
the
mean,
time
I
they were developing
understand
that,
it.
they still didn't have those rights yet. So for Deadpool, but and they did, if you remember back in that post credit scene in the first Avengers movie, they did hint at the death connection because there's the thing the what character's name, the guy Alexis Denisoff played, but he said to challenge the humans is to court death, and then yet
Yep.
Thanos smiling and everything. So they did kind of tease that there, and then they changed it at some point, and I liked the change at first, but now I am kind of wishing that we had it the other way around.
Stayed with the right story, yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's what it is at the end of the day, but I like the fact that she's here now. We can open up some more possibilities. We could even go back and retell the story if we want to, or if
Right.
they want to, rather. They're not going to hire me because I'd be like, that's not how they did it in the comic book. And they'd be like, all right, who invited this guy in? Get out of here.
Okay. Now the other thing we'd like to talk about is what kind of was your introduction to superheroes? How'd you get into this world in the first place?
Oh, wow. Um, so as a child, I found a box of comic books at an old house my grandpa was getting ready to do some renovation work on, and they were just like, "Hey, just take those old books with you." I was like, oh, "Okay, cool." And that's kind of where I fell in love with comic books and superheroes. And I remember like Spider Man was like the very first one I had read, and then we had the older like cartoons with the Spider Man and that kind of stuff. So I grew up watching those. So for me, I mean, it started as a kid, and then you kind of suppress it for a little while, and then the MCU comes out, and you're kind of find yourself thrown right back into the midst of things. Because there was a good 20 years where I didn't buy a single comic book. I just got it wasn't in my purview at the time. Like I wasn't tracking on it as much, and then my daughter had an interest in it, and then it kind of got my interest peaked again. And here I find myself with a podcast about comic books and superheroes and, you know, coming on to other people's podcast and talking about comic books and superheroes. And now it's just what I do. I love it.
That's very cool that your daughter got into it too. About how old is she?
Oh, my daughter's a freshman in college.
Okay, and so she got
Yeah.
into it when she was in
So she started in manga in middle school. And then we got a comic book store just right up the road from us. And she's like, "Hey, can we stop here? I want to look at stuff." And what really got me back into comic books was realizing that Spawn was still going. Because Spawn in the '90s was like my read. I would
That was your jam?
anytime. Yeah, that was my jam. It's still my jam to this day. I'm loving the whole Spawn verse, and I pick them up every week, every single one. So
That's awesome. So you were able to successfully migrate your daughter from manga into Western superhero. No,
now she still does manga too.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's one of the things I'm hoping, because I live in Japan, so it's the manga thing is almost definite. But I'm trying to get my kids on superhero stuff early, so they already know Spider-Man, they know Groot, they love Groot, and so we're slowly starting to get them into some stuff. They love Ninja Turtles as well, so
Oh, you got to
they're
get them
still
on the
very
Ninja
young though.
Turtles early.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. We
But
got
yeah,
them in.
no. What part
Surprisingly,
of Japan are you living in?
I'm living in southern Kyushu. It's in Kagoshima. So it's
Okay.
basically as far south as you can get before you hit Okinawa is where I'm at.
I know.
And
I know. Yeah,
oh, okay,
it's
all
a
right.
jumping
And
point to Okinawa. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And so I'm trying to get. They're only they're 2 and 3 right now, so they're
Oh, that's the
still very
perfect
young.
age.
But yeah, they're starting to get into it. And
So it's
with
it's funny
turtles,
that you mention it like that. Is this past Halloween we did trunk or treat, and I convinced my comic shop to sell me his leftover free comic book day books, and that's what I did for trunk or treat this year. Is I gave out candy and comic books.
that's a good idea. That's an awesome idea.
So
Yeah,
yeah,
anything you can to try and get the next generation hooked on it, I'm totally on board with that. Uh,
absolutely.
so anyway, what kind of stuff is grabbing your attention these days? Anything, not necessarily for any
Ah,
of your shows or anything, but just in general, what's kind of grabbing your attention?
um, I've been watching a lot more anime than I normally do. I'm watching what is it, Dan to Dan right now. Loving it. I'm actually like literally on season 1, episode 4 of Arcane because I've heard so many great things about it that I gotta now go back and watch it. Um, see, I'm still reading Spawn, like the whole Spawn verse. Anything horror related to comic books, I love. And it's been really cool on Blue Sky getting to meet and have conversations with those guys writing the stuff that I'm reading. And they're all very receptive. I've never had that before on any social media platform. So that to me has been really cool.
I am loving Blue Sky right now. It's just, and that's how we hooked up here today, is because you found me on Blue Sky as well. And it's just the past. So we're recording this in the end of November, and in like the past week or so, Blue Sky has just exploded in popularity. Like I signed up with it back when they had the invite codes, and I would check in every now and then, but there wasn't a whole lot of stuff going on. But now it's just there's such a flurry of activity. These starter
Mm-hmm.
packs that people have been posting up and just make it so easy
Oh,
to
those have been
connect with so
so
many people.
great.
Oh yeah, it's amazing. It's just such a fun place. I disconnected from social media. I like deleted everything from my phone, but when Blue Sky started jumping, I started getting into it, and that's the only one I've got installed on my phone right now, and that's the only one I'm checking regularly. I dip into
Oh,
Threads every now and then on my browser, just like this is not the thing anymore.
yeah, Threads may be the last man standing as far as I'm concerned. I'm probably about to drop it. I've had it basically since it come out. And I think I got like 35 followers on there, and I'm dropping like the same type of content that I'm putting on Blue Sky. It goes on to Threads, it goes on to Instagram, it goes onto my Facebook group for the podcast. And by far, Blue Sky is the most receptive to my content. And I'm like, I'm just going to cultivate that and probably end up getting rid of Threads, to be fair. Just because it's one less thing I'm going to have to worry about posting to when, unless I'm shaking my ass and half naked, I'm not getting the reception on that, that platform.
Yeah, and nobody wants me shaking my ass on there. So
Nor me, nor me. I mean, I'm a big old bearded dude, so nobody wants to see that shit.
yeah, I hear you there. Well, some people do. You never know, but
Yeah, to be fair, I mean, yeah, something out there for
um,
everybody.
exactly. Yeah. For my part, so I just recorded the last week's episode. I just recorded it right before we were recording today now, and so my thing that's been kind of interesting me is I had mentioned that we watched the second half of the last season of Cobra Kai. Really second third.
Terrific.
Yes,
Yeah.
really so much fun, really great. But other than that, just diving into some comics lately. I got the Marvel
So how
Unlimited.
are
I got
you
a
getting your comics? Are you doing the Marvel Unlimited? Is that how you're reading
digitally,
everything?
yeah.
Okay.
I was doing I was really into Comixology for a while and their sales, but since
Yep.
Amazon, completely screwed them over, it's been harder to get stuff through them. The sales aren't as good as they used to be. It's harder to navigate now, so it's not as good
Yep.
as it once was. But Marvel
Yeah,
Unlimited, they've really stepped up in like the past year. I used to have it
they
a few
it's
years
worth the
back.
money on that one.
It is, and I had I had canceled my I had subscribed for a while with they had the X-Men 97 sale and they had that deal on it.
Yep.
And then I'd read up all through the end of Krakoa stuff and I'm like, okay, I think I'm good now. Let me just pause the subscription for a while. And then something came up where I saw it was like a year an annual subscription price for like half
Yep.
off or something ridiculous
Yep.
like that. So I'm like, all right, well let me jump back on it then. And just jumping back on and going through and reading stuff here and there. I also read other stuff, still through Comixologies. I just finished the first volume of the was the Detective Comics. I think it was Nocturne by Ram V.
Yes.
I just finished the Overture. The trade is the one I just finished, and that was really cool too.
Okay. Yeah.
But that's all I've been really checking out lately, just here and there, dipping into comics
It
when I have the time.
check
here and
out
there.
check out Ghost Machine stuff.
Ghost Machine.
Yeah. I'm telling you right now, they have what is it? See, Geiger, Devour. They just released Rockefellers, and I'm telling you, and they have what's the other ones like GI Junk or something like that. I can't remember the name of it exactly, or Junkyard Joe, I think is what it might be. And but dude, and then Rook,
Junkyard
dude,
Joe. Yeah, I'm looking at their website right
yeah,
now.
they have not had a bad release, and every single one is a great read, and the art is fantastic. And I think
I
they're
have
being
seen
printed.
this. Yeah, I've seen this
It's
on. I
printed
think I've
by
seen it on
Image for Ghost
Global
Machine.
Comics. Yeah,
They are really freaking good. And the group of artists that put that together is a really good group of people, and
oh
they
wow,
just
they
want to
got
make good
some.
comic books. Big names. Jeff Johns is in
Yeah,
there.
Jeff Johns, Jason Fabuk, Brian Hitch,
Yep.
Gary Frank, Francis Manapul, Brad Meltzer,
Yep.
Ivan Rice, Peter J. Tomasi. So yeah, they got a lot of really good names on there. I'm gonna have to check this out.
And
This looks really
Francis did the Rockefellers that just came out. I'm getting ready to read that here in a little bit, and yeah, I'm excited. They've, like I said, not a single bad book yet.
yeah, especially Peter
Devour
J.
was
Tomasi.
really good.
He's someone who I've gotten really fond of in recent years after reading his Superman Rebirth stuff and his Batman and Robin stuff. So I've been getting into his stuff more and more these days. So I'll have to check this out. This looks interesting. Thank you.
Hey, no worries.
So today, like I mentioned, we are talking about Ghost Rider, 2007 movie starring Nicolas Cage as Johnny Blaze,
Yep.
and which debuted to, shall we say, less than stellar reviews. And another comic book connection is Mark Steven Johnson wrote and directed this. He also directed the Daredevil movie with Ben Affleck, which I still maintain that the director's cut is a pretty good movie. I really enjoyed that.
That's actually one of
that
the notes
director's
I
cut.
have over here. Is like he wrote Daredevil, and it was the director's cut was like outstanding to me. I enjoyed it greatly.
Yes. I mean, I still think Elektra was superfluous, even in the director's cut. But even that aside, like I still
It
love
was
that
still
director's
good
cut.
though.
It was good. It was good. Ben
Yeah.
Affleck, Colin Farrell, Michael Clark Duncan, John Favreau as Foggy. They all did an excellent job in that movie. And even when I saw the theatrical cut, I dug the theatrical cut at the time. I realize now in retrospect it's got a lot of problems with it. And So I had seen the theatrical cut of Ghost Rider, and I had been really excited for it because I'm pretty sure that this came out after the director's cut of Daredevil. So I was already kind of
You're correct.
primed to enjoy it. And I remember everyone was saying from the trailers and stuff, they're like, "Oh, it looks bad. It looks bad." I'm like, "No, no, no, give it a chance. Give it a chance." And then I had to kind of eat crow after it came out. Um, this
Yeah,
is the first time I had watched the extended cut, though. And
yeah,
honestly, I
that's
could
what I
not tell
watched
what the
earlier.
difference was.
There wasn't like I think there's a few extra minutes in there of him as the Ghost Rider, but I don't know if it's Nicolas Cage or because Steven Johnson wrote it as well,
Hmm.
and I don't know, man. I don't know if it was Nicolas Cage in his acting or if it was the story itself. Because I'm a huge fan of the Ghost Rider, huge fan of the comic book. And so when this was getting ready to come out, I'm like, oh God, I got to see this, you know? Even if it isn't good at the end of the day, it's still, we're getting the Ghost Rider on the screen.
Hmm.
And geez, it was some bad acting. I'm not going to lie. Wes Bentley as Blackheart, like he overdone it. I don't know, but even he wasn't good in this.
Well, even Peter Fonda wasn't really that good. I mean, honestly, the only performance that worked in this was Sam Elliott. I think he was the only one that really kind of nailed it.
Dude, he to me will forever be caretaker, Carter Slade, and that to me he was the perfect individual to be in that role.
Hmm.
And don't get me wrong, I'm a huge Eva Mendes fan. Love her to death. But even her as Roxanne in this, just like, yeah, dude.
Yeah,
And I want to like this movie so bad, and I just can't bring myself to do it. And I'm
I
so
feel
glad
you.
we're about to get a reboot.
Yeah, yeah. So you mentioned that you were a fan of the Ghost Rider. So let's talk a little bit about the Ghost Rider fandom. What's your history been with that character? Were you more of a John Blaze
So
fan or more of a Danny Ketch fan?
both.
Okay.
For me, for comic books, I love that kind of stuff. Like the so Zarathos, who is the spirit of vengeance that takes over these individuals to make them into the Ghost Rider. I'm just going to call him Mephisto because that's easier to pronounce than the
Mm-hmm.
Mistophocles.
Miss stuff.
Um, but he also was hinted at in Agatha recently. So I'm more of a fan of that underground, like the demons and the witches and that side of the MCU. I'm the same way with DC too. I really enjoy the darker stuff. So for me, like this falls into that supernatural realm of that's why I like the Ghost Rider because he's literally just the devil's or the demon's um soul collector, at the end of the day. So that to me is what made him appeal to me so much. And the comic book runs of Johnny Blaze have always been good, but it does get repetitive. That's why I like the fact that they have Danny Ketch and what's the other one? Oh shit.
I haven't read any of the current ones, so I
Can't
don't
think of the other
know.
one right now off the top of my head. And then you got the Cosmic Ghost Rider, which is really a fun read when if you can find it. Um, it's just it's always so different, But again, you can read it for a single run, but then the next run it feels like the same thing. So you kind of have to like read a run, like pause for a little bit, and then kind of circle back to it later on. Otherwise, it just feels like you're reading the same story over and over and over and over again. So
Yeah. For me it was I'm not sure if you remember, but back in the 19 it was like around 95 or something, mid 90s, where they had a line of Ghost Rider toys that came out. And
I
there was
absolutely do.
this there was this big swing for Ghost Rider because they had introduced him they had brought him into the Fantastic Four animated series in the
Mhm.
Galactus storyline, and I think they were planning to do a spin-off animated series with him.
Yep.
And so I guess this toy line was kind of there to kind of like prime the pump for it. That animated series never ended up happening, but those figures were kind of my introduction to the Ghost Rider. And
Yep.
because I think if I remember correctly, I think they actually came packaged with like some mini comics. and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So that was kind of my first introduction to the character. And then a few years later, I had a buddy of mine who loved Ghost Rider. He even now he still runs a Ghost Rider site. I think it's called Vengeance Unleashed or something along those lines. It's
Okay.
like,
Okay.
yeah, I can't remember that's the exact name, but it's like the biggest ghost. It was at one point. I'm not sure if it still is one of the biggest Ghost Rider sites on the net. Um, and he got me interested in the character a little bit more, and so he
Mm-hmm.
got me to go back and check out the original Johnny Blaze comics. Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, like around like I think it was like around issue 93 or something like that when they revealed about Zeratos. That was when I really kind of he said that's where you got to
Yep.
start. He's like that's where it
Yep.
gets really good. And I read that run and it was very cool. And I went back and I read the Dan Ketch stuff. And
Mm-hmm.
more recently, I loved Jason Aaron's run on Ghost Rider, like the Heavens on
Yep.
Fire stuff. And when he brought back
Mm-hmm.
Dan Ketch, I thought all of that stuff was pure gold. I was totally on board for all that. And I was psyched about this movie. I mean, not so psyched about Nicolas Cage, but I was excited
Oh
about
no.
a Ghost Rider movie. And
And you know it's funny because he pushed for that. Nicolas Cage, he's got a Ghost Rider tattoo that I mean you don't see it in the movie. He had to wear makeup to cover it,
Mhm.
otherwise it would be visible while he was playing Johnny Blaze. But he pushed for himself to be in that role, similar to how we had see who else has done it recently. Jamie Foxx pushing to be the new Al Simmons in Spawn.
Mhm.
So
Well, I
we're
mean, you also
getting
have
that.
Dwayne Johnson as the Rock. That's or is this the Rock as Black Adam?
Yeah. So it's Nicolas Cage was one of the first ones to do that
Mm.
with him being the Ghost Rider.
Yeah,
So
and well, he was pushing just to be any superhero because Nicolas Cage is a
yep.
huge fan of the comic books. Like
Yep.
his name is actually Coppola. Like, but he decided he didn't want to use that. He wanted to
Yeah.
get didn't want to get famous off his uncle's name, is Francis Ford Coppola's nephew. So instead, he changed his name to Cage, and he got it from Luke Cage. He
Yep.
famously to deal with some of his debts, he sold off this massive comic book collection he had.
Oh, I
Um,
remember.
yeah, he named his son, I think, Kal-El as well, didn't he?
Kal-El.
And
Yep.
yeah, and he was obviously supposed to play Superman in
His
Superman
Superman
Return or
number
Superman Lives.
one was stolen. Like
There
he
was
had the Superman number one. I think it was a CGC, and it was stolen in transport, I believe.
yeah, I remember there was a podcast all about that theft.
Mm-hmm.
And I haven't
Yep.
listened to it, but I remember hearing the ads for it. Um and I think Nicolas Cage is a good actor when he tries.
Yeah, so that one movie he recently just did, where he was the vampire, but it's more focused. Like he's the vampire, but it's more focused on his servant.
Oh yeah, Renfeld.
Yeah, Renfield. That was phenomenal stuff. Like
Mhm.
he in that movie was absolutely great. That was the Nicolas Cage that I enjoy watching. Nicolas Cage in as Johnny Blaze, he really tried to overact. It felt like everything was exaggerated
Mhm.
to me in that movie. So
See, I will say, like, even him in the sequel to this, Spirit of Vengeance. I really like Spirit of Vengeance.
2011, yeah.
It's so much
It was
fun.
a
It's just
it felt more Ghost Rider. You know what I'm saying?
yes,
Like the theatrics behind everything in it, like it was over the top, and that to me is Ghost Rider. Is
exactly.
exaggerated, over the top, the penance stare, the chains, the fire. I'm like it really showed a lot more of his, like who the Ghost Rider is, and kind of like his powers and abilities,
Hmm.
which is what I really appreciated about that movie.
Yeah, it was. We covered it way back on the show, and I said they basically they took a more of a grindhouse approach to Ghost Rider, and it worked very well.
That's the
And
way it
even
should have been.
exactly, and Cage's performance in it was also very much in that. Like he was doing the. You're right. He's over the top in this, but he was over the top in that too. But he was over the top in a different, more like grindhousey type of way that really
Yep.
kind of worked. And he didn't try this stupid kind of accent, which keeps slipping in and out in this movie.
Dude, okay, it was meant to be California, I think, in the movie. And everybody's got like this thick southern drawl to them. I'm like, what the hell are y'all doing? I'm like, is this? Well, it was originally he was in Texas originally, and then I think he meets up back up with Roxy, and they're in L.A.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm like, even the people in L.A. had this like weird Southern accent about them, and I'm like,
Yeah,
why? I
yeah,
mean,
it's
the whole
very
movie
bizarre.
was filmed in Australia, so it's pretty cool though. In some of the overhead shots that you see of the city, you'll see some of the cars are driving down the opposite side of the road because it was never reversed.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just a cool little oopsies from the movie.
Yeah, and so before we jump too much more into this and talk a little bit more about it, we're going to take a quick break. So we get some ads here, and then we'll come right back. Since you're listening to this show, I already know you love watching superhero movies and TV shows, and you just might enjoy superhero comics. But how about superhero novels? I'm giving away 2 free superhero novels and 1 free superhero short story. Visit percivalconstantine.com/SCP to get access to Vanguard, Heroes Forged, the first novel in my own Avengers and X-Men inspired superhero novel series, and Ronin Born, my cyberpunk superhero novel set in a futuristic Japan. I'm also throwing in Fire and Lightning, a free prequel story to my new Power Rangers inspired superhero series Omega Knights. So visit percivalconstantine.com/SCP, those are just the letters SCP, to get started, or click on the link in the show notes. And now on with the show. And we are back, still talking about Ghost Rider. So, one of the things that I wanted to talk about here is I thought this was kind of funny. So there's Brett Cullen who plays Barton Blaze in this. One of the things I thought was funny about him is that I was watching him. The first time he comes on screen, my first thought is like, oh, Chris Cooper's in this? Because he feels like Chris Cooper a lot. And I looked up the names. I'm like, wait, no, it doesn't looks he's kind of looks like him, but then he's not. So then I looked it up and saw it was Brett Cullen. And I'm like, where do I know this guy from before? And I looked him up, and he was also in Joker, which I thought was funny because he played Thomas Wayne in Joker. And in that, originally the part was supposed to go to Alec Baldwin, but he had to drop out at the last minute. So then they got Brett Cullen. So it's like Brett Cullen does like an Alec Baldwin impersonation in that movie. Whereas here he does kind of like a Chris Cooper impersonation. So it was really kind of interesting, I thought.
Yeah, I really liked his interpretation of Barton. It was spot on, and yeah, man, he's such a good actor when you see him in danger, but he's forgettable at the end of the day. But when you see him and stuff, you're like, damn, he pulls everything off he does. Like he's really good. It's just at the end of that movie, you're gonna forget who he is until you see him in another movie, 5 years from now.
Exactly. That's exactly what I
thought. And it sucks, because like I said, he executes everything perfectly, but you just don't see him often. Or it just doesn't feel memorable, even though you see him. You're like, damn, man, he killed it.
Yeah. Yeah, he did a good job. Although I did think the timing was kind of weird because, Johnny makes this deal with Mephisto. I'm just gonna say Mephisto as well, because Mephistopheles or whatever it's pronounced. Mephisto is just easier. Everyone who's read the comics knows it's Mephisto, so that's just easier that way.
Yeah.
But in the comics, it was weird because, or in the movie, it was weird because Mephisto tells him by sunrise he'll be cured, he'll be healthy again, and then Johnny wakes up the next day and Barton says, "Oh, I feel great. I went to get my X-rays done." I'm like, so why was he going to get the X-rays done in the middle of the night or something? That's pretty early to get it done and get it all checked out.
Yeah, it feels like there's like 10 minutes of movie missing right there. And I thought that earlier when I was rewatching it. I'm like, I feel like there's like 10, maybe 15 minutes of movie missing right there that we're not getting, or they just edited it out for time. But yeah, it's missing right there. Like, it's like, because how do you get home? We never see how he gets home. We don't even know what day it is. It's a really weird sequence right there.
Yeah.
And but yeah. And then Mephisto shows up and nitzes him to ensure Johnny is compliant.
Yeah, and that was another weird thing too, is the fact that, he comes to Johnny at 17 and he doesn't appear again until Johnny's like we got to say, like, let's be generous and say like 37.
Yep.
And it's just, why? why that big gap of time? It doesn't, it like the whole purpose of the Ghost Rider as it's set up in this movie is that he is, he's this bounty hunter. He's there to
Yep.
collect on, Mephisto's deals. But then he just kind of disappears for 20 years or whatever. And I just felt like that was, this is where I think Spirit of Vengeance worked really well, is that it sets you up as he's been the Ghost Rider this whole time.
Yep.
And I think it works better that way. And it would make more sense for Johnny's whole death wish kind of thing if he had been struggling with this curse the whole time.
Yep.
But the way it is, it just doesn't quite, it doesn't feel like those two things connect. It's like they wanted to do an origin story, but they also wanted to do, have this more, they felt like they wanted two things that aren't quite compatible.
Yeah, you're exactly right, and I think in the comic book it doesn't even take that long for him to, make the deal and become the Ghost Rider. I don't
No, it's
remember
like
there
right
being
away.
that. Yeah, so for me, it was just kind of like, what were y'all trying to do? It's like, are you trying to sell us a love story in the middle of this? Is that why we're doing it this way? But yeah, it would be one of those where you'd have to have Mark Steven Johnson in a room and go, dude, what were you thinking? Or did you give somebody else control at some point? And, even let me back it up. Stan Lee was an executive producer on this.
Mhm.
At what point did Stan Lee go, what the heck are y'all doing?
If I'm going to guess, I would probably say that what likely happened is because this was, I mean, Stan Lee is executive producer. I think at this point he wasn't really doing a whole lot. It was pretty much just a name only
Yeah,
credit.
he didn't cameo this. Yeah.
No, he didn't cameo in this at all either. But yeah, most of the stuff that he was in, quote unquote executive producer on, he wasn't really heavily involved in. He was just kind of, it was just kind of like a name, like just a credit.
Yeah.
But my guess would be because this was, 2007, so this was still in the early day. This is this weird growing pains period of superhero movies when it was all basically origin stories. And so
Yeah,
my guess is maybe Mark Steven Johnson did want to do something since Nicolas Cage is an older actor. Maybe they did want to do something like having him be kind of like this, having lived with the curse for a while. But my guess is probably Sony came to him and said, no, we can't do that. We have to show how he becomes the Ghost Rider. We have to show the origin. I'm thinking that's probably what happened, is that it seems like studio interference.
Sony doing Sony things,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, they're doing the same thing with Spider-Man and everybody else in between.
Yes, exactly.
They're about to do the same thing to Craven.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I saw something online. They said that, we're gonna redeem the Sony Spider universe. I'm like, are you really?
No.
I'm not so sure about that.
They need to literally just take their hands off of it, hand it all over to Marvel in the MCU, and be like, hey, we're sorry we've been making bad movies with your material. Here's it back. We're sorry.
I mean, they're not
it ain't
going
gonna
to
happen
that,
because that's their cash cows.
Exactly. But, I think at least what they would do is try and make a deal with Marvel where, like they do with the Spider-Man films, Marvel has creative control over those. At least do that and just, farm out the creative side of things to Marvel and then just collect your paycheck would be a much better idea.
Exactly. And I think, because I know we're getting, I think it's going to end up being Danny Ketch in the MCU at some point, and it's supposed to be Norman Reedus, is what the rumor has been for quite a while now. So that would be awesome to see. But for me, when I think Norman Reedus, I think motorcycle. So for me, I'm like, he needs to be Johnny Blaze, Plus, Danny Ketch has already been in a TV series as somebody else, and that guy was really good. So why go against that?
Which series did Ketch appear in?
Was it Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., I think.
So Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., they had Robbie Reyes, but
Robbie Reyes, my bad, yeah.
And they did hint at there was another Ghost Rider in there. That's how Robbie got his powers. But they didn't say if it was
that
Ketch
was his
or
uncle.
Blaze.
No, that was his uncle.
That wasn't the Ghost Rider. No, his uncle was someone different, I think.
I know, but how he got his powers is his uncle was possessing the car. His spirit possessed the car. So when he got in the car and turned it on, it possessed him and turned him into a Ghost Rider.
But wasn't that in the comics?
Yeah.
Yeah, but in the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., he got the powers from a previous Ghost Rider.
Ah, okay. Okay.
Yeah, and it was the rumor was that they had wanted Nicolas Cage to come back and reprise the role of Blaze and hand it over, and then Cage refused. Apparently, again, this is what I've heard about rumors. I'm not sure if that it was actually true or not.
Yeah. No, that
But they
sounds
had
a very
never,
Nicolas Cage thing.
yeah, but they never said who that Ghost Rider was. They just said it was just a Ghost Rider. We don't know if it was John Blaze or Dan Ketch, and even still, we don't know
Yeah.
how much of Agents of Shield is considered part of the MCU continuity now because they had split it off
Yeah.
at some point. So, so we'll see what happens. I don't think we'll be tied overly to what they did in Agents of Shield with Ghost Rider because we did see the Darkhold again, and that had like no connection to what they saw in Agents of Shield.
So actually, after I read or watched the movie, I had to do some online digging. So they're saying that this movie, this Ghost Rider, takes place on Earth 121347.
Mhm.
So it's not in the main MCU, which I think is what, 616.
Or there's other numbers too, depending on which fans are talking, how specific fans are getting about it.
Yeah, I know, but man, it's really hard to say anymore. I mean, but Nicolas Cage refusing to come back to do something like that, it sounds like a very Nicolas Cage thing to do because to him, he's going to be the Ghost Rider no matter what.
Yeah. But you never know. We might see him pop up in Secret Wars or something.
To be fair to him, I would enjoy that very much if he popped back up. Because there's the Ghost Rider.
That, yeah.
What is it? The League of Ghost Riders or whatever it's called, which is just a whole bunch of different Ghost Riders from different Earths that got together and did Ghost Rider things.
Mm-hmm. That'd be interesting. Yeah. And also here, so, and my late co-host, what he used to say is that when Nicolas Cage gets lazy, he falls back on Elvis, and he just does an Elvis impersonation. And I feel like that's what he was doing in a lot of this, like from the weird accent that goes in and out. And even when he points at Mephisto, when he comes to him, he like does like an Elvis pose at him. Like, why are you pointing at him like that? This makes no sense.
He was spot on. Yeah, absolutely. That's what it is.
Yeah. and I feel like he was doing, yeah. Even like, just like the weird thing, like he's eating the jelly beans and all that kind of stuff. And it just feels like this is, falling back on Elvis type of thing. And also the whole thing with him and Roxanne, like, I get that he's not going to meet Roxanne because he's got this curse now, but why drive up to her in the rain, look at her, not say anything, and drive away? Like, that just feels like a dick move. I get you can't be with her.
Dude, not only was it a dick move, but it was so like 1990s romance cliche. Yeah. And I'm just like, wait, this was 2007. Why are we pulling out the 90s romance, like teen romance movies? But hey,
yes,
whatever works for them, Yeah, yeah. And then to leave her there at the end of the movie.
Yes, yeah. And also, Peter Fonda. Apparently, Peter Fonda was Nicolas Cage's choice for Mephisto, and Peter Fonda's a good actor, but I feel like you needed someone with a little bit more style, a little bit more panache,
presence.
Yeah, he just felt very kind of bland in the role, like, And I was thinking in my head, Peter Stormare in Constantine, right?
Yes,
like memorable performance, or even Ciarán Hinds in Spirit of Vengeance.
He was probably the best devil ever put on the screen.
Have you ever seen The Prophecy?
Which possibly
with the first one with Christopher Walken and Viggo Mortensen played Lucifer in that.
Yeah,
I think that's got to be my pick.
Yeah, that's a good one too. That is a very good one.
You needed someone with a little bit more presence to play these like demonic characters, or like, I think about Supernatural and how they always did a good job of giving the demons a lot of personality in that show.
Yes. And that's what go back to what I said earlier about Wes Bentley. Like, you see him in things and he's really good, but he was bland as fuck as Blackheart. And to me, Blackheart is like, in the comic book, he has most demons in comic books and TV shows, they have an over the top out there personality that goes with what they are. And
Exactly.
none of them in this show, like whether it was one of the elements, what have you, none of them had that. None of them brought that to the stage of I'm a demon. I can do basically whatever I want. And there's nothing you can do to stop that because of who I am. So they have these over the top personalities that you come to expect from that. And we just didn't get it in this one for some reason. They're
Yeah.
bland and they're boring. And yeah, it just didn't work. And I like Peter Fonda.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, classic
But
actor.
it
I mean,
didn't,
well, even like if
yeah.
you had even Donald Logue, who plays, this, Mac, who's Johnny's friend and member of his pit crew and everything, you know, even if you had Donald Logue play that part, I think it would have been a lot more interesting.
That dude's full of personality.
Mm-hmm.
Like you see him in just about anything. This is the only movie where he really doesn't. You see some signs of his personality in it when he's talking to Johnny and all, but for the most part, even he is kind of like this. Like everybody had to be born as so for Nicolas Cage and as Johnny Blaze. It
Mm-hmm.
felt like it felt like everybody took a step back from what they bring to the table as an actor, and so he can have the forefront and kind of be that character that is Johnny Blaze
Yeah.
is
I
what
mean,
it
even
feels
if
like
you
now
had,
that.
yeah.
No,
I'm
go
sorry.
ahead, go
Finish your
ahead.
thought. No. So I was just
Oh,
gonna say that. Sorry. You go
no,
ahead.
go ahead, Dana. No,
All
you
right.
go ahead.
I
Your
was gonna
show,
say
your show.
that. All right. We're gonna have to make some notes about this part later. But one of the things that you know killed me too is even if you had Nicolas Cage as Mephisto and then you had Matt Long who played the young John Blaze, do it that way. I think that would be a lot more interesting.
Now that you bring it up, absolutely.
I mean, I think Nicolas Cage would have had a lot more fun in the part of that because he feels like, I mean, just everyone feels like they're sleepwalking in this thing.
Mm-hmm. The whole movie, and every single body, even the detectives in this movie, they're trying to pull the good cop bad cop type of deal, and it's just kind of like, wow, y'all two are the most boringest cops in any TV
Mm-hmm.
show I've ever seen. And I'm like, y'all need to chill or bring it to the front and just be like, if you're gonna do good cop bad cop, at least be over the top with it,
Exactly.
especially in a movie like this.
Exactly. Yeah. If this is where I think this is why I think Spirit of Vengeance works. I know a lot of people don't like that movie, but I dig it a lot because it just swung for the fences and it just had a lot of fun with it. This one, they don't do any of that. They're constantly playing it safe. They're constantly worried about, I guess maybe they're worried about trying to keep it very grounded. And,
And
in
they
the
had to
last
operate within
episode,
a PG-13 too.
yeah, yeah. In the last episode, I mentioned this about the movie we covered there, Dark Avenger. And I'm going to say the same thing I said then that I'm going to say about this. The biggest sin I think a superhero movie can make is be boring. I mean, if you're gonna be bad, then you lean into being bad. Like you just
Mm-hmm.
go like I actually unironically love Batman and Robin because it just completely leans into the camp side of things.
Yes,
Um
that's spot on. Yeah.
and Spirit of Vengeance too for very similar reasons. Like it is over the top, it doesn't work in a lot of
Mm-hmm.
places, but it's fun because it just says fuck it. Let's just see what
Yeah.
happens.
Yeah.
And but when
That's
these
why
movies
it's also rated R.
Exactly. Yeah, that too. But when these movies they try to play it very safe like this, it just you lose something. And I said this about
Mm-hmm.
Morbius too. Like I didn't think Morbius was awful. I just think it was boring as hell. It
Mm-hmm.
just like it was not
And I
the
wonder how much
train
of
wreck
that
I
is
wanted it to be.
Jared Leto,
Yeah.
because him in the comic book is over the top, out there. You never know if he's going to be the good guy or the bad guy. You don't know what you're going to get with him in the comic book.
Yeah.
And with this one, it was just like, dude, Jared Leto, you're boring in that
Yes.
movie.
And I felt the same thing here. And it's Nicolas Cage. Like he does not have to be boring. He knows how to keep your
No.
attention in a movie.
Yes. I
Even if
mean, that
it's a
guy's
bad
real life
movie.
is a train
Yes.
wreck.
Yeah. I
So
mean, like
he
you
knows
mentioned,
train wreck.
in Renfield, right? He's completely over the top in that, or stuff like Prisoners of the Ghostland, or, um, what was it, the Wicker Man remake, just the bees and all that kind of stuff. Like,
Yo, that was actually good though.
I actually never saw it, but just like the idea of being over the top like that is just, just lean into it. And when you're playing
And
this character who is cursed with, who has this curse hanging over your head, it's gonna fuck you up in ways beyond just eating jelly beans all the time.
Yep. Yeah. And like that movie where he was selling illegal weapons.
Lord of War.
Lord of War. That movie was spot on. Nicolas Cage was amazing in that movie.
Love that movie.
So
yes.
He's got these brilliant moments, but this was not one of them. And I don't know how much he's seen this kind of as like, this is my moment. I didn't get to be Superman, so this is my moment. And I kind of want to do X, Y, and Z. And it just failed to execute.
Mm-hmm.
Unlike in Spirit of Vengeance, where he was just like, hey guys, let's just go out here and have fun and be over the top. And it's rated R. There's going to be blood. There's going to be guts. There's going to be all this stuff. And it's going to be awesome. And it was.
I think a big part of that is the directors you had that, because that was the guys who did Crash. Not Crash. What? Crank. What was it? Neville Dean and Taylor. And they are just like, we're just going balls out with this. And I think that influenced Cage's performance a lot, and then he just kind of felt free to just kind of cut loose. Whereas this one, I'm not sure if it was Johnson, if it was the studio, or someone that was trying to rein it in, or if maybe it was Cage himself feeling like this is my chance to do like a serious superhero movie. But yeah, it just, none of it works at all in this. And even like the Ghost Rider effects, like I'm comparing it to Spirit of Vengeance, where it's got like the skull has got like this blackened look to it. It's way too pristine here, and it feels like everything feels overly sanitized.
Yes. And to me, that says Sony and PG-13.
Yes, yeah. And
it's like you could have spent the extra money on this movie and made that look really good, because we had the CGI then to do it. It just, because I mean, we were doing it. Blade come out what, a year or two before this? Like
Blade came out.
Blade had been out for a while. So Blade
Yeah.
had been out for a while. So that's kind of like, and this predates the modern MCU by a year, because this Ghost Rider come out in February of 2007, and Iron Man didn't release until 2008.
Right. Yeah, it was the summer of 2008. Yeah.
Yeah.
But you also had like the X-Men movies. All three of them had come out before this. I think Spider-Man 3 had also come out like a year or two before this as well.
I think you're right. Yep.
So yeah, so we had precedents for better CGI in movies than this. The whole idea of having the Ghost Rider speak, I think, was also a big mistake too, because it just, the way that the CGI matches with the skull and like the voice that Cage tries to use, like it just felt, this is where it felt cheesy. It just, like, him trying to speak just did not work for me at all. And I think that's why when they did Spirit of Vengeance, unless I'm mistaken, he doesn't speak when he's the Ghost Rider in Spirit of Vengeance.
Nope. No. It was a lot more facials in Spirit of Vengeance. So that's why it worked, though.
I agree.
Because they gave him the facial expressions to express what it is that he wanted and what he was doing.
Yes.
The only time he ever really spoke, I think in Spirit of Vengeance, is the one time where he said, "Look into my eyes," for the penance stare in that scene. So, but
I think it was probably subtle enough, like the way he said it. It's been a few years since I've seen Spirit of Vengeance, but the way he said it, the way that the way that it was shot or something like that, it didn't feel disjointed in the way it feels very disjointed when he speaks here.
It felt very cheap.
Yes. Yes. And I also want to talk about Carter Slade and Sam Elliott, because while I think Sam Elliott is the perfect character if you're going to get like a Western Ghost Rider, so having him play the Carter Slade / caretaker, which they combine those two together here. And also Carter Slade wasn't technically a Ghost Rider. He has like a spiritual connection to it. So it's and he was never like, they did have, actual Western Ghost Riders in the Trail of Tears series, but that wasn't Carter Slade. But I did think that the visual here, again, this looks really cool. And my favorite scene in the movie is also the scene that is the most maddening to me. And that's when you have, Slade and Blaze driving across the desert in their Ghost Rider personas. It looks amazing.
Yes.
That scene has no fucking purpose though, because
No.
he says, I've got one last ride in me. And then they go and they ride and you think, okay, they're going to do this together. They're going to team up. We're going to see some, Western Ghost Rider versus modern Ghost Rider, teaming up together, and it's going to be badass. And they get there, and then Slade gets off his horse, he stops, and he says, he's like, this is where I leave you. Like, that was all I had in me. He's like, what the fuck was the point of that then?
What he should have said is, this is where the budget stops, and you got to go by yourself. Because that's what it felt like. Because I waited that entire movie for that one scene to see him pull the Ghost Rider and say he has one more ride. Like, the whole movie for that one.
Yeah.
Yes. I was like, oh, we're going to get to see this, and it's going to be so badass. And it was. And then that was it.
Yeah.
He got the one last ride, and that was it. And then he rode off into the sunset and disappeared.
So
and that to me
annoying.
Was so disappointing.
I mean, that scene perfectly exemplifies this movie. It's something that it looks like it could have been so awesome, and they could have made it, but then they just gave up.
Yeah, it's like seeing really good previews for a movie and then going to see the movie, and the only good thing about that entire movie where it was what they showed you in the previews.
Yeah, exactly. Just a overall very disappointing movie. And like we said, Wes Bentley, he's just completely uninspired as Blackheart. The romance, as such as it is, between Roxanne and Johnny, is they've got like no chemistry together. I mean, like, and it's not even, and like you said, it's not Eva Mendes, it's not Nicolas Cage. They just don't work together. Because you look at, say, Hitch. Right? Eva Mendes and Will Smith have amazing chemistry in that movie. But
yes,
this, and you look at Cage and some other stuff he's been in where, and he's got really good chemistry with the people he's working with. But this is just like, there's nothing there.
Yeah, it's like she didn't want to even be there.
Mm-hmm. And it's also, it's also hard to kind of imagine these two as contemporaries, given that, Cage is 10 years older than Mendes, and he looks like 20 years older than her.
Yeah, he had the whole, that scene where, like, the way they had his hair, like, even the whole movie, the way they did his hair, like, they tried to make him look younger than what he is to be, like he was in his 20s when he was doing this. Yeah. I think Nicolas Cage was, like, in his 40s.
Something like that.
30s. Yeah. And it was just like, dude, what are y'all doing? Like, his hair plugs or whatever it is, his wig, I'm like, it wasn't working. And then the makeup they had on him, you can tell it was makeup to try to hide the aging. It was either that or really bad CGI, and I'm hoping it was makeup and not the CGI.
Yeah, and you can see that because they gave up on that in Spirit of Vengeance because they wanted him to look older in that. So he was
supposed to be grizzled in that one. Yeah,
yes. And just like everyone in that movie has so much more personality. You had Idris Elba in that, who's like, still in every scene he's in. You had Ciarán Hinds,
no matter what he's in.
Yes. But even you had like Christopher Lambert in there, and like all these other characters who were doing a much better job. And even if you got like get that cast and put them in this movie and just redo the whole thing and like recast some of these roles, I think it'd be a lot more interesting.
Absolutely it would be.
Now that's kind of all I really have to say. That's kind of like my rant about this movie. Is there anything else we haven't mentioned so far that you really wanted to touch on?
So I had a really cool note. So the girl in the alley getting robbed when he does the pendant stare for the first time. Do you know who that is?
Yeah, that's Rebel Wilson.
Yep, Rebel Wilson. I thought that was because I was watching it as I was watching it today. I was like, man, she looks familiar. Then as I'm going back through and like writing some notes out and stuff, I was like, holy shit, it was, I don't know if I can say bad words on here. My bad.
Yes. No,
but I was like, holy shit, that's Rebel Wilson. I'm like, that's why she looks so familiar. And it was just like 2007 Rebel Wilson. I didn't know who she was.
Yeah, yeah, I noticed that as I'm just preparing here for the because I did recognize her. I thought she looked familiar, but I didn't quite pick up on it. And then I saw her name in here in the credits, so I'm like, oh, okay,
Yep.
yeah. But yeah, overall, just kind of a disappointment. And I had hoped that maybe with because sometimes I go back to these old films that I hated the first time around, that I watch them again. I'm
Hmm.
like, okay, that has some things to say about it.
Yeah.
This I feel like the same now as I did when I first saw it. Like the only
Yes.
real redeeming quality is Sam Elliott, and he's just
Hmm.
completely wasted in it.
Yes. 100% wasted. And it's one of those, like, when I seen it on your list, I was just like, oh, that might be fun to talk about. And then as I rewatched it today, I was like, maybe not so much. But I'm like, maybe we should have did Ninja Turtles or something. But hey, I'm
Um,
glad we were here and we did it.
well,
I feel like it's one of those where let's I'm gonna help you do the hard one. You're gonna get it out of the way, and we're gonna at least try to make it somewhat fun.
sometimes actually I have found this to be true is that sometimes talking about these lesser movies tends to sometimes make for a more interesting conversation because if it's a movie that's like universally beloved that everybody agrees is amazing,
Hmm.
it's kind of hard to find ways to dive into it because it's just like I remember this when we talked about Mask of the Phantasm. Like, wow, that was really awesome. Yeah, it was. It's like there's not really much else to go from there.
Yeah.
But this one, there's a little bit more to dive into. We can talk about things where maybe there was some chance for something more interesting, but yeah, just not really anything worth saying here.
No, I mean, I feel like there's a lot of blown opportunities in here, especially when it came to using Sam Elliott to kind of mentor maybe the younger Johnny Blaze,
Hmm.
and like, hey, you're capable of so much more than what you're doing as the Ghost Rider.
Yeah,
And we really didn't see any of that until the Spirit of Vengeance, when we really seen him unleash that full gambit of what it is that he is capable of.
yeah.
So there was some missed opportunities there. The scene where he becomes the Ghost Rider for the first time, I felt could have been done 100 times better,
Well, I
because
mean,
it
why are
kind of felt unoriginal and just kind of like this is his first change. It should be this beautiful scene of him, undergoing this transformation and becoming the Ghost Rider, but we don't get that. We kind of get this like very up, scaled Nicolas Cage overacting of this thing that has taken place. And I was like, yeah, as I rewatched it, I was like, that could have been so much better. And there's missed
Mhm.
opportunities there.
Yes, absolutely. Um, Speaking of that too, I mean, why were his feet on fire? It was such a weird choice.
Dude, yeah. I'm like,
All
I've
right.
never seen him do that in any comic book or
Yeah.
anything else, but that's what y'all went with. Okay, let's roll
Yeah.
with it.
It was definitely a choice. And, it doesn't seem like Mark Steven Johnson has done a whole lot after this that I at least know of.
I
Um,
haven't seen. I was like, I kind of want to look and see, but I never went back and was kind of like looked.
well, it looks like he came up with the story for Christopher Robin, but as far as director stuff, When in Rome, Killing Season, Finding Steve McQueen, Love Guaranteed, Love in the Villa, and I have never heard of any of these movies. So,
Yeah, I was about to say, I'm like, dude, I'm like, you're speaking Greek to me right now. I'm like, did he do those?
I mean, well, even looking at the other stuff he did, like honestly, I think Daredevil is when he peaked.
Yeah.
All right. Oh well, disappointing as the word of the day for this. Jeff, thanks for coming on and for taking the hit with this though.
Hey, no
So,
worries.
but
I,
why
I,
don't you?
I will happily do it again.
Well, we'll happily have you on again to do it. So, why don't you tell people where they can find you?
All right, yeah. So you can find me on Blue Sky as the USDN chairman, as well as if you go to any other social media platform, Facebook, Threads, Instagram, and just type in USDN, you're going to find me on all of those. Under that, you'll find my personal account because that says USDN chairman. My podcast account just says USDN podcast. So yeah, if you go to any social media site, type in USDN, you're going to find me.
Okay. All right.
I
Well,
made it simple.
Yes, well, we'll also make it even easier. You can go check out the show notes, and we'll have links to some of that stuff there. So please make sure to check that out. As for us, we are Super Cinema Pod on pretty much all the socials. That's Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky is where I am most active these days. And also Superhero Cinephiles on Facebook, and superherocinephiles.com is the website where you can see all our past episodes and find out how to be a guest yourself if you're into that kind of thing. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll talk to you next time. Thanks for listening to the Superhero Cinephiles podcast. Superhero Cinephiles is produced by me, Percival Constantine. The show is created by myself and the late, great Derek Ferguson, our host emeritus. Visit us on the web at superherocinephiles.com to listen to past episodes or find out how you can be a guest yourself. Support the show by visiting our advertiser links or click the Buy Me a Coffee link on the website to make a one-time donation. We are Super Cinema Pod on both Instagram and Blue Sky, so please be sure to follow us. We'd also appreciate if you could rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts and share us with your friends.
Thank you for listening. And as always, good night, good evening. God bless.